We live in a time where masculinity is shamed and men don't know what it means to be a man. As a pastor and counselor, I've spent the better part of my life equipping and training others. My goal with this show is to translate my hard-earned experience into tools and tactics to help you become stronger as a man. This is the BraveCo podcast. I'm your host, Jason Vellet. All right, men, welcome to the BraveCo podcast. This week, I have one of my favorite men in my life and a man who has poured so much into me. When I think about my story in all the different phases that I've had to work through and overcome in my life, from raising kids to my divorce to remarriage, Danny was such a key pillar and still is such a key pillar in my life. And I love bringing guys like Danny on because Danny is one of those men who builds other men. And he's one of those men who is, I think, one of the best guides that we have alive today to really help men become walk out their real identity, learn healthy boundaries, learn good communication. He's a man's man. So, Danny, thanks so much for coming on. It's just such an honor to do this with you.
Great to be here, man. I totally believe in what you're doing. So let's do this.
Hey, I want to dive in a little bit. We had a BraveCo conference back in August, and you came and spoke for us. It was one of the most phenomenal messages that I've heard, just on being a man, having courage, and actually going after and pursuing what God's put in your heart. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Your opening line to us was, "You were created for greatness." And I know around Bethel, it's not a very, it wouldn't be a very revelatory statement around Bethel because of how much we've talked about it. I mean, today, at one point, it was absolutely revelatory. You were created for greatness. My dad does the Prince and Pauper stuff. Bill does the heaven to earth stuff. You do all the same stuff. But I think when we talk about men in our culture today, this idea that you were born for greatness, that when God created each man, that he created man with a purpose, I think is absolutely revolutionary for men today. And I'm wondering if you can just unpack that a little bit, maybe just a little bit of the idea, the theology around that. And we're just going to dive into, what builds a great man, what makes a man great, and what did God put him on this earth to do?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no father hopes that his son turns out to be below average, right?
Yeah.
If you could see a father, if you had to choose from F to A, what would you like your son's life to turn out like?
Yeah.
Like, C plus. I like my son's life to be above average, a C plus. I don't want him to be, I don't want him to have too much. Said no father ever. And
Yes.
So I think that greatness starts out with us being created in the image of God.
Yeah.
Not in the image of a camel or a monkey or a dolphin, but we're created in the image of God himself. Therefore, we are now about to be deployed in being like our Father, which is, God-like, Christ-like, literally Christ-like. Jesus comes and shows us this is what it looks like.
Yeah. That's powerful. I know I think most men today, a lot of men today, not most, I think a lot of men today are struggling so much because that earthly model wasn't there. I mean, we know the statistics. We've talked about the statistics before on fatherlessness. We are in the most fatherless generation in history that hasn't been attributed to war. So basically, fathers are just saying, "Nah, I'd rather go and do my own thing than to grow up at home and raise these kids that I made." And I think that that's obviously contributing to the lack of identity in men, right? Because it's the father that passes down, and of course, the mother plays a big role in that, but it's the father that really affirms and gives that identity, especially to a man. His masculinity is poured into a man from another man. Um, but I guess the question really is more practical than that. There's a lot of men that listen to this podcast and that follow you as well. That in theory we know, like, okay, my dad didn't give me good identity. Check, I got that. Now I'm 38 or I'm 42, like I am. I feel like I'm screwed because how do I live a life of rejection and pain, and then all of a sudden at 38 or 40 or 42 or 60, make some go from I feel like I wasn't worthy of love to, okay, even though my dad rejected me or I didn't have a dad, now how do I move into I am a great man?
Oh, it takes one to know one, right? So you've
Yeah.
really got to surround yourself with uh, the potential of seeing great men. This is
Yeah.
this is why it's so expensive for men to become isolated and, in essence, their own teacher, their own leader, their own master in many ways. When a guy becomes isolated, he he's reduced his character development, his sense of reality, his gauge of truth. He's reduced it to himself.
Mm.
And then when that guy then surrounds himself with worldly context, now he's reduced himself to himself surrounded by lies.
Mm.
So what a man actually has to do is he has to graft into the body of Christ and find men of God that you would actually want those attributes in your life. So
Yeah.
how do you get that? And I think that's why BraveCo is so critical, is that
Yeah.
you're going to find a band of brothers. You're going to find a tribe. You're going to find
Yep.
input and challenge to your reality, to your measure of truth, and to all the lies that you've been cultivating. And you'll learn, for the most part, you'll learn how to be a man by from other men. I mean, that's pretty much how it works.
Is that what happened in your life? Would you share just a little bit of your story? Because I think your story is super fascinating, and really common, all at the same time. On, people look at you today and they just see a great man who's got an awesome inheritance and, pretty much the life that most men would want to live. Uh, but you didn't start out there. Can you share just a little bit about your story?
Sure. Um, yeah. Mom gets pregnant at 17, ends up marrying my dad. Uh, I think I was born when she was 19, and my dad went into the Marine Corps. So they weren't together much. He gets out. Uh, my little brother's conceived. He's born, and they divorce right after that. So I'm
Yeah.
5. My brother's 1. And my mom, I think, is 24-ish, and moves to a small town in Northern California called Weaverville as a 24-year-old, looking for a daddy for her boys.
Jeez.
And we end up with a parade of men through our house until I'm 12 years old, when she marries my first stepfather. And then, and so there's my image of masculinity is
Yeah.
basically, just a stockyard, and who want no responsibility, who want no, accountability. And then, I end up raising my brother from the time he's 15 until I'm 19, or I'm 19, he's 15. My mom left. He didn't want to go. So now I got Johnny going through high school. At 21, I get saved, and I meet for the first time in my life what the definition of men translates to be.
Yeah.
And it starts with a guy like Bill Johnson,
Mm,
Bill Derryberry, Charlie Harper, Chris Valentin,
yeah.
uh, you know, uh, Keith Alvord. I mean, all these men that have taken on the responsibility to become Christ-like
Yeah.
in their character, in their identity, in their marriage, in their family, in their community. That now I have an absolute transformation from what not to do to what I want to give away to my children someday.
Was it hard for you? Like, was it an easy transition? So you go from, you know, all this all these guys coming into your life and kind of the pain. And I think that you were involved in drugs and stuff back then. Was it an easy transition to go from living in the world to like, okay, now you see my dad and Bill and all these guys? How hard was that transition for you?
Well, I mean, it's probably easier than you think, but there's
Hmm.
a certain amount of heartbreak because I grew up in this little town where everybody knows everybody, right? I mean,
Yeah,
there's
golly.
3,500 people, and I've been there 2/3 of my life, 3/4 of
Right.
my life, really. And I got this good news, and I want to tell everybody, I want to tell all my friends, hey, and they all just went, weirdo, reject. So that was the first hurdle, but the community that I grafted into was so rich and
Right.
alive, and and the spirit of God in my life was so real that I can't even compare what it cost me to what I gained. And I was on the fast track. I mean,
Wow.
I was on the fast track. I was at everybody's house every night, just soaking up that's what
Wow.
I want that's what I want my life to look like right there. How do I get me some of that? And I've just had people like Bill and Chris and Charlie in my life for 40 years.
See, I think that's such a key. Like, it's not like you just found a guy to hang out with every once in a while. When I when I hear you talk about you being over their houses and doing life together, and I mean being at the church together and home groups, and I remember I was just a little boy back in that time.
Yes, you were.
And but most of my memories, when I think back to my childhood, it's a house full of people, and
Yeah.
I'm interacting with all them. Then when it's late, when it's my bedtime, I'm up the stairs and I'm crawling from my second story, and I'm sneaking up to the ledge to watch you guys hang out afterwards. So everyone would be down, you know, downstairs, and we had these big bay windows that I could, from the top, I could look into the window and see what was happening. I remember I would spend hours up there. And of course, you know, I didn't realize that if I could see them, they could see me through the window.
Yeah.
Um, but that was my childhood, is going to men's meetings, falling asleep under the chairs, going to church, staying late every week, which isn't that big of a deal, but it was when I was young, you know, staying late and driving the equipment from, you know, this old theater. I don't even know where we took it. across probably to the other offices because we rented the our theater every week. So it's just when I look at the culture that men are living in today, it's very much a it's not very personal. There's not very much contact. It's very knowledge based, super knowledge based. Guys running after knowledge, chasing knowledge. But when I look at like the real transformation that happened for my dad and that happened for you, yeah, there was some great knowledge there, but you guys had so much life on life connection.
Yeah. Yeah.
So much life on life connection.
Yeah. And I'll keep going back to, I learned to be a man from watching other men.
Yeah.
And I learned what not to do from watching other men too. So it, it's very important that we get together with other men. And I don't mean like other boys. I
Yeah.
mean other men, like men
Yeah.
who have taken responsibility as leaders, as fathers, as
Yeah.
husbands, as business owners, as providers. I mean, men who have taken responsibility, that is really where men learn to be men.
Talk about that.
I just think that, when you take on responsibility, things don't work out the way you had planned. You're not necessarily in control of
Mm,
the outcome. You're just in charge of the responsibility. You literally are held accountable for your commitments. So as a leader, like I think it's important for young men to step into positions of accepting more responsibility in church. Take more
yeah.
responsibility at the school with where your children are. This is one of the reasons we're in such crazy
Yeah.
times of perversion being taught to
Yeah.
our children because so few parents are still engaged in the school system, and it's
Yeah.
largely due to being winnowed out
Yeah.
but at the same time somebody should have squawked and said, who's trying to chase the parents away from this school district?
Yeah.
How is this able to happen? But
Yeah.
it just happens. Pour into the kids in sports, pour into um, the health and well-being of other men around you. Add your strength wherever you can, but literally look for places to take more responsibility, because in
I
that
love it. Go ahead. Go
because
ahead. You
in
had
that
this quote. Sorry, let me go and then you can go. You had this quote which tags onto this. You say responsibility leads to freedom, freedom leads to responsibility.
right,
Like unpack
absolutely.
that just a little bit.
Well, I think that when it's a choice to take responsibility, it's a choice to decide between being responsible or blaming it on someone else. But once you take responsibility, what comes with responsibility is authority.
Mm,
Authority and responsibility are going to match as you climb up. So the more authority you want in life comes from that level of responsibility. But
yeah.
what people classically like what social media does is social media gives you the illusion that you have this much authority because you have this much knowledge, but you have no responsibility. So nobody really cares until you match it with responsibility. Nobody really cares what you say. And
Yeah.
that's how you get influence and favor, is in paying attention to the match that climbs with how much responsibility are you willing to take for those that you want to influence.
Man, it's so good. I was listening to Jordan Peterson a while back, and he said, responsibility gives us purpose. And I started thinking about how how much we try just naturally, we try to get out of responsibility because it feels like such a burden, right? And I see it classically. I see it in school ministry students a lot. I see it in my kids. I was like that for a long time, right? Is oh, I don't want another, I don't want another burden. Well, the challenge is you end up in this endless wandering, trying to figure
Yeah,
out what your purpose is in life, right? Like, what am I called to do?
yeah,
It's why so many purpose driven life books were sold. I mean, how many books did he sell? I can't remember. Rick Warren, sell purpose driven life. People are trying to find their sweet spot, what they've been called for,
yeah.
without something that doesn't take any responsibility, no risk, no like. You said one thing at the conference that just made me laugh so hard. I wrote it down. Um, you said uh, most of what you do isn't your passion, but then you illustrated it like most of what you really need to do in life. So many men are going like, that's not my passion. I don't, my passion is in catching 10-pound bass and shooting 200-inch deer and chasing, 9 by 12 elk up the mountain. And that's where my passion lies. That's where it's at. And we get so freaking lost with our everyday boring mundane life where we're really supposed to thrive, but guys aren't thriving today. Like, guys, little secret, if your life sucks, it's because you weren't ever meant to just chase 10-pound bass and shoot elk every week. And like, life wasn't, you're actually supposed to really have responsibility,
Yeah,
which typically starts with, God, I don't feel like doing this.
yeah, yeah. I think there's a difference between uh, responsibility and pleasure. And responsibility. The thing that really shapes you the most is the amount of sacrifice involved in your your activity. So I mean, sometimes we go on a hunting trip and it's just grueling, and the story is awesome,
Yeah.
largely
Yeah.
because I almost died. I thought I was going to die. At one point, I thought I was going to die. That's what makes
Yeah.
this story so great.
It's the
If it
best.
was just if it was simple, easy, hey, we flew in, there were 10 to choose from. I shot one, I got back in the helicopter and it flew away. No story there, you know.
No
But
story.
but when you build a marriage, when you build a family, when you build a business, when you build a ministry, there is so much
Yeah.
sacrifice in that. It's what makes it rich. It's what gives it content. It's what builds context to your life. And I think the current fantasy world of being an influencer and living your passion
Yeah.
is like eating hollow chocolate bunnies all the rest of your life. It's just
Yeah,
gonna
totally.
it's gonna be so empty. I love the. Have you seen the what's it called? American. It's Kurt Warner story. American.
Oh.
Oh,
Oh, I know what you're
underdog.
talking about.
American Underdog. So
I
Kurt
haven't watched
Warner,
it.
the quarterback for the Rams.
Yeah, I haven't watched it.
It's a great story. Great film. But it's one more of those films where he's he's reaching the championship. He's reaching the pinnacle of whatever point in his career, and there was no one there to celebrate it with except all the hollowed out chocolate Easter bunnies. There was no substance. There was
Yeah.
no one there that he loved, that he poured his life into, that he sacrificed for. He was how many movies have we seen where they're like, yeah, this was an empty victory because I had
Yeah.
no one there to
Yeah.
celebrate with.
It's so true. And in order to have somebody there to celebrate with you, I mean, you have to build real relationships and you have to take on that responsibility
Yeah.
and show up. I think one of the major problems that men are facing is they don't have a lot of confidence, right? Because confidence comes in doing. That's where we gain confidence. And the other way that we get confidence is through encouragement, right? So I remember, golly, I can remember so many different times raising my kids. I literally could think through them right now and list them out when I finally call you. And I would always call you before I call my dad because my dad has great advice for other stuff, but not always the best advice for the kids. Not always. Sometimes he did, but not always. So you were my go-to, which I tell guys all the time, like you got to have your guides in different areas of life, right? So when it came to marriage and the kids, you were my guide. So I would I would track you down. I remember waiting outside of the senior leadership team meeting because you were in the SLT meeting for the church, and I'm just waiting for it to end because I've got a major problem and I don't know what to do. I feel insecure. I feel like a not necessarily a bad dad. I feel lost, so lost. And I'd have a conversation with you and you would help me unpack what's going on. You'd help me build a strategy, but then you would give me the courage, right? You'd give me the courage. Jay, you can do this. You're such an awesome dad. And I would take your courage, not mine. I would take yours and that game plan and go back into battle and
Yeah.
execute. And man, sorry, I was just getting emotional. So that saved me so many times. And that's supposed to be the model for
Yeah.
every man. Every man is supposed to have a Danny A. And listen, man, like I want to tell you, you don't need a literal Danny Silk, because that's just another BS excuse. Like you need a guy who's steps ahead of you, who's willing to look at you and be in the battle with you. You don't have to have the best guy on the planet like I had. And there's other areas of my life where I didn't have the best guy on the planet. I just had a guy who's a little bit further along. He's one step ahead, going like, yeah, do this. But I think really for men, what we're talking about is you are called to greatness. You are meant to live this life of fulfillment. And the fulfillment for you comes in the same way that it came for Jesus. It came in knowing your identity, live a life of serving, rally men around you, and do life with others, and then do stuff that's beyond you. And the only way that you could sustain that is if you do it with other people. I mean, really, like that is the fulfilling life.
Yeah, and the key that you just rattled off there is do. You just said about 6 do's, and there is a part of our culture that is fantasy. Like you're talking about
Yeah.
getting confidence.
Yeah.
Confidence comes from doing,
Yeah.
not simulating. You
Yes.
know, because simulating is, porn is simulating, and
Yeah.
video games are simulating, and
Yep.
uh, metaverse is a ginormous simulation, which will basically just prove that you have no competencies at all in real life.
Yeah.
It's
Yep.
it's all it's all out here in this illusion. So like doing real life, doing real relationships, that's where love happens. And if you're going to, you know, boil your life down to one purpose that matters, is that
Yeah.
you'll learn how to love. And you're not going to learn how to love if you're afraid of responsibility and or sacrifice.
Yeah. It's so hard, man. That's just so true. Is It really is. I was going to say something that I started thinking like, oh man, the the true test of do I know how to love comes when you face something that's really unlovable and you still make that hard choice, right? How many times have we done that in marriage or even with ourselves, right? I fail myself and I have
Yeah.
to remember, oh, I'm not the judge of me. I'm still worthy of love. But Danny, you really do, you embody what it means to be uh a king and a priest in your home and to God, and you embody what it means to be a man. And I've seen you fail, not morally. I've seen you make mistakes. I've seen you own those. I've seen you build your kids in relationships with other men. And I mean, as a son, I just want to say how proud I am to be running uh, in your wake, in how much you've done for me and my family and the men that are a part of BraveCo. And so thank you for that. And I think for my life, my goal has always been to model what you and my dad and Bill and Keith Albert, all these other great men, and to take it a step further, to try and push the envelope, not with daring or dangerous risks, but in the extravagant love and in the inheritance, and the get this knowledge out there so that, maybe somebody will figure it out at 17 and not 25, or but that we'd all be able to be courageous. So you've paved that way for me. So I just want to publicly thank you for that.
That's awesome. Thanks, Jay. I mean, I think that watching young men like yourself take on so much responsibility and do such an amazing job with it. I'm watching your little family. You're like, oh my gosh, this guy we're doing it again. We're doing
Number
this
5.
again.
Yeah. Yep. 12 days ago, just had another baby.
Just had another baby. How old are you?
42.
42 coming up? Or yeah,
42 coming up. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. We share the same birthday.
I'll text you happy birthday on your birthday.
Yeah.
On
You
my
too.
birthday. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just to watch this, to see you come alive by taking responsibility for pouring into men and giving away who you are and what you've been given. I mean, because guys like you and I, we've been given a pretty rare experience being in
It's
the
true.
environment that we're in.
It's
And
true.
so I don't even know how you don't give it away. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe some people get there, but I don't even know how not to give it away. It feels like
Yeah.
it's like, we found the end of the rainbow here. We're like, hey,
Yeah.
come here,
It's the
here you
funnest
go.
thing in the world.
It is so much fun. And so this thrills me to watch you, and knowing the journey that you've been on, it's gonna resource transformation in so many men's lives, as it already has, but it's just gonna get bigger.
Guys, if you're looking to level up your game in parenting, marriage, communication, Danny Silk is the absolute pro. He's the foremost leader in these areas. It's where I learned how to parent at a very, very young age, reading his books, listening to his Loving on Purpose series. And man, Danny has done so much to help me. And I want to encourage you to go to lovingonpurpose.com and grab some of Danny's resources if you are looking to grow in any of those areas. Danny, thank you so much for coming on, for being with us today. Your wisdom, your love, your support means the world. And man, I couldn't be more thankful for you. So thanks so much, guys. Have an incredible week.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening to the BraveCo podcast. If you like this podcast, would you please rate it, review it, leave us a great comment. And if you like this episode in particular, share it with your friends and family. That helps us to spread the word. Guys, stay brave. We'll see you next week.